your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and I'm sitting in for Kirby today. Normally I'm in on Fridays, and Kirby is actually leading a group tour of the Holy Land. A lot of Point of View listeners are with him, and I'm sure they're having a wonderful time. But I'm so happy to be here and that you're with us. And here's a piece of news that might not make some of you so happy, but I just received this from GOP USA. A recent appointee of President Barack Obama, it says, could reflect his administration's desire to promote its agenda in the faith community. He has actually appointed a 50-year-old man who lives as a woman to serve on the Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Now, this is a body that influences grants to religious organizations and churches that operate social programs. So they, I guess, deal with the poor and underprivileged. This appointee identifies as Barbara Satin. And a comment from Peter LaBarbera, who heads up Americans for Truth about homosexuality. He says that Obama is obsessed with promoting homosexualism and now transsexuality. He's engaged in a war on normal for the last 8 years, you think. We will ask Bob Knight about this. He's got a piece. He's talking about totalitarian... What's his word? Totalitarian tolerance. We posted a piece from him at pointofview.net. We'll ask him about this. Also, Star Parker is going to join me a little bit later. She's an expert on black poverty and also the sanctity of human life, and we'll combine those two topics in our interview. Certainly, there's a black genocide going on in the country, and so many more proportionally black babies are aborted. Planned Parenthood actually seems to target them. We'll discuss all that with Star Parker. But now, a very interesting topic. Immigrants applying for U.S. citizenship do have to pass a civics test, as many of you may know, if you know anyone who's gained citizenship. It's a long and basically very demanding course that you have to learn a lot of information about American history and government. And approximately 93% of these, according to our next guest, succeed at that, and they do very well. But only 65% of native-born Americans could answer correctly when asked the same questions on the civics test that immigrants are required to take. That's not good, and there's an initiative out there that seeks to change that. It's called the Civics Education Initiative, and with me to talk about it is Dr. Lucian Spataro, and he is a noted researcher, educator, and author. Actually worked in that field for more than 30 years in education and the private sector. Recently, he led the nonprofit organization Joe Foss Institute as president and CEO. He still sits on the board, and this is the organization that is actually spearheading this initiative. He also is on the board for the Civics Proficiency Institute, which is an affiliate of the Joe Foss Institute. And Dr. Spataro, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you very much, Penn. I appreciate you having me on the air today.
I appreciate you being with me. I was at a conference and I heard Sandra Froman speak. I know she's part of your organization, and it interested me greatly because I think if I tried to take this test, I mean, just looking at some of the questions, I know some of the answers, but I don't know that I do much better than the average American, which is much worse than the average immigrant has to do when they take the test, correct?
Yes, that's true. The average immigrant that comes to the U.S. and takes the test and works with the course on the first pass, 93% of those folks will pass this exam. And studies have shown over the last couple of decades that most of our high school seniors, the majority of those kids, can't pass this test, and it's actually lower, I think, than 65%. I think it's as low as 17 or 18% can pass it on the first go-around. So I think we've got a bubbling problem here that's sort of happened over this last couple of years. Senator Day O'Connor, Justice O'Connor, who we work with and kind of got us going earlier on, has called this the quiet crisis in education.
I think the crisis is coming to boil right now. If you just look at the quality of the political discourse today, the presidential campaign, I thought the irritation of some people about the whole delegate process was interesting and showed a sort of a ignorance about civics. And so I think in a sense it's starting to play out in presidential politics, isn't it?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if folks who are upset about the political process and feel disenfranchised or marginalized, the first step, in solving the problem is really understanding the rules of the game. So we have a constitutional republic that sort of organizes our country around these amendments in this Constitution. And so I think the first step for those folks would be to understand the rules and get in the game and play on the same platform. And I think a lot of the problems that we currently have today will sort of go away when that happens.
So tell us about the Civics Education Initiative. What do you seek to attain?
Well, first and foremost, we want to shine a big, bright light on what Justice O'Connor has often termed the quiet crisis in education over the last couple of decades. There's been a de-emphasis or sliding sort of slippery slope of less emphasis on civics and history in our government in schools across the country, primarily because of the massive focus and the move towards STEM, which is really good and important content. It's important for us to be competitive in the global marketplace under a STEM sort of content discipline initiative, but at the same time we have to organize ourselves around what it is that we do as a country. So I think that platform has shifted in some ways, and a balanced curriculum is what we're driving towards. So our first and foremost objective is to shine a big bright light on this crisis that many don't know is bubbling at this time, and then talk to folks about how we can level the playing field and provide a curriculum in schools that is more equally is balanced like it was when we were growing up as kids, equally emphasized. And so that's first. And in an effort to do that, we're working with states across the country to pass legislation in every state that requires that kids pass the same test immigrants must pass to become citizens. And it's getting
So you would
great
pass this to graduate from high school?
Graduate from high school, correct. And so it's a pretty simple concept, and left, right, and independent voters are very attracted to it. It's a very bipartisan initiative, and we're getting great traction. The same time last year, we had 4 states that passed it, and today we have 16 states that have passed this exact legislation or something very similar to it, and we have it bubbling in 18 more states.
Well, that's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, you can go to pointofview.net and click through to the Civics Education Initiative. You'll see the picture of our guest, Lucian Spataro, on the website, and then click through. And one of the interesting things you can do when you go there is to actually see the test. You could take the test, couldn't you?
Yeah, you can take the test by clicking through to our site and take the test. It gives you results immediately. There's a 25-question version, a 50-question version, the 100-question version. So it's a lot of fun. People take it and they are just amazed.
Might be humbling.
Yeah. Well, actually, you'll do better than you think you will. So I'd take it. It's fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to pointofview.net and check this out, either during the break, which we're coming up on a break. We will continue our conversation with Dr. Spataro, or take it later. That's what I'm going to do. I saw it, and the first few questions, as he said, I could answer. But as going down into some of the other categories, some of them I did not know the answers. And so I think it would behoove us to get behind this initiative. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
What are the key components of the free enterprise system in America today? Arthur Brooks, in his book The Battle, describes 5 principles. The first principle is the purpose of free enterprise is human flourishing, not materialism. In this statement, he sets forth the moral case for free enterprise. He argues in one chapter that people flourish when they earn their own success. It's not money per se that's a measure. Instead, it's what Arthur Brooks called earned success. A second principle is that America stands for equality of opportunity, not equality of income. Arthur Brooks has found that non-Americans will tell you that Americans are the most egalitarian people in the world. Most of us believe that we should have similar opportunities, but also believe that we might end up in different places. A third principle is that we seek to stimulate true prosperity, not treat poverty. Arthur Brooks says that nearly every study of impoverished communities around the world show that prosperity, not poverty, is the right focus if we want to lift people out of poverty. A fourth principle is that America can and should be a gift to the world. Here is where we see a split in values. While some Americans see America as exploitative, most Americans believe that our country does more good than harm. And moreover, they believe that the nation has been a force for good in the world. And a final principle is that what truly matters is principle, not political power. Americans reject the pursuit of political power at the exercise of principle. Confidence in politicians in America is now as low as it was during the era of Watergate. You know, Arthur Brooks in his book explains how we can make the case for the free enterprise system, and these are key principles that we need to promote. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, Risen, the resurrection as seen through the eyes of a non-believer. Available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're talking about civics and civics education, and my guest is Dr. Lucian Spataro, and he's with the Joe Foss Institute. There's an initiative out there to try to accomplish civics education or to bring it back into the country. And here's an article that comes out of Kansas. I'm not sure if they've passed this initiative yet, but they've been considering it. And the article comes out of Kansas.com. Do you know how many voting members are in the U.S. House of Representatives? That's one of the questions. Can you explain what the Constitution does? Could you name a state that borders Canada? If so, you're doing better than about a third of native-born American adults who couldn't pass a civics test administered to immigrants applying for U.S. citizenship. But Lucian, you seek to change that, and I understand you told us that over 30 states now have either begun this process or are already implementing it, correct?
Correct. So right now we have passage of our legislation, the Civics Education Initiative, in its entirety or in part in 15 states, 13, hopefully 15 by the end of tomorrow. And then we have it bubbling in another 15 states or 16 states. And that legislation is still in session, in some cases, through the end of this calendar year and or be carried over into the next year, 2017, which is a really good progress considering we started off last year at the same time with 4 states. Well,
it's as you said, it's a nonpartisan idea. I think, really, how could you be against civics education? And one of the things that's concerned me, Lucian, is the rise of socialism among our young people. College students don't see what's wrong with it. And,
right.
The popularity of Bernie Sanders, for instance. And I don't think that, if their parents say to them, they're horrified over support of certain positions that sound socialist, and these kids probably would be too if they really understood the differences, but they don't, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, with the younger folks. Kids graduate from high school today. I'm not even sure if voting is really high on their priority list. It's a responsibility, it's a right, it's a privilege that we have, but I don't know if they really even learn in high school that they have the right to vote when they graduate and move on. So it's not really high on their priority list. And I think also the rules of the game, sort of how our government operates, the constitutional republic we have versus a democracy, versus socialism is something that they don't learn in school anymore. So I think if they were to learn these sort of how our country operates, this platform that we have, and how unique and how important and great it is, and how it's differentiated from other countries, I think they would be more inclined to understand and be less inclined to think that socialism, for example, is a good approach.
We've put a piece up at pointofview.net. It mentions the Joe Foss Institute and your initiative. It's why civics is about more than citizenship. It comes out of the Atlantic. It's a good piece, and it starts out only 1 in 5 Americans ages 18 through 29 cast a ballot in last year's election. That is, I mean, in a way that's disturbing, but in a way, uninformed voters are worse than no voters.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, again, I think the folks that feel disenfranchised, marginalized, concerned with the way the country is going, I think those folks that are operating on an emotional level, if they were to learn more about how they could change things or how they could impact things through the constitutional republic that we have and how our country is governed, I think there would be all the divisiveness, or much of the divisiveness, and a lot of the problems that we have today would go away, because we'd be all on the same platform, sort of understanding how we can move our country forward. And that isn't something they learn today in school. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's some certain core subjects that kids used to learn. I think in my parents' day and in my day, to some degree, it's just not there anymore, is it?
No, it isn't. And again, the platform in the school, what is being taught today, is by and large driven by the standardized testing platform that consists primarily of STEM. So when teachers are incented to teach that platform because that's what's tested, then ultimately our discipline, which is civics and or history and some of the other soft disciplines, fall to the back of the burner or the stove. And so that's what Justice O'Connor has been calling it the quiet crisis in education. That platform, that level playing field, the disciplines that we all learned in school and came out of school with, we're not learning that anymore.
Well, we've talked about education for decades on this program and how it's become career training as opposed to just an overall education of the whole person. So I think it's part of that trend. These are certainly jobs that are needed, higher paying jobs in the STEM fields. But also, everyone needs to know history. Everyone needs to be a good reader and be able to interpret and write and all of these things. And so it does speak to our education system. I just think it's great that you're going to this, taking this piece of it and pushing it. And I want to ask you, Lucian, if someone, I guess you could tell if your state has signed on to this by going to your website, could you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I can tell you the states that have signed on.
Great,
so
that'd
far,
be great.
Yeah, our website will go into more detail. But North Dakota, South Dakota, Arizona, Utah, Missouri, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Louisiana, South Carolina, Virginia in part, New Hampshire, and we have it bubbling in 15 more states.
Well, I think that it would be great because we have a lot of people who are sort of activists who listen to this program. If people took a look and got more information and perhaps passed it along to their state legislator, their state senator, or whatever, if their state was not on the list that you mentioned.
Yes, and that would be very helpful. And if you go to the website, you can see the states that we have it bubbling in, and those states have all assigned a legislative bill number to the legislation. So if they were to see their state was on that list, they could just go to their representative and say, hey, I want to sign on to support this, and I want you to know I'm in support of it. No, it's funny. Left, right, and independent voters across the country, when asked, would you vote for this legislation, it was by and large 86% on average across the country. And then we asked these same folks, left, right, and independent voters, another question. We asked them, would you vote for a legislator who voted for this legislation? Again, very, very high. 78% on average across the country said they'd vote for a legislator who voted for this legislation. So it's a very powerful, because when you learn that this is happening, and it's happening on our watch as adults, we don't want that to happen. So this is our opportunity to change things and fix this, which happened on our watch. Well,
what do you hope would be, say, if you were to look at America in 20 years, mm-hmm. what would be your hope and sort of your dream for things to look like, especially with regard to this area of education? and just the politics as a whole?
So all of this starts in the schools. So my first, anecdotal sort of point of support is that, when Thomas Jefferson first envisioned public schools back in the day with our forefathers, the foremost purpose of a public school was to embed in our youth, the civic virtues that would sustain our fledgling republic as we move forward as a country. So first and foremost, that is, in fact, why public schools were invented by our forefathers back in the day, was to, pass on to the next generation down the road these civic virtues and these rights, responsibilities, and roles. So that would be 20 years from now. I think the most important and first sort of priority for a school system to do that, and then secondarily, promote a common curriculum that, focuses on STEM and jobs and that sort of thing as well. But first and foremost, how do you govern the country?
Absolutely. Listen, thank you so much for giving us some time today to inform us of this initiative and for your hard work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Penna.
Ladies and gentlemen, an interesting initiative. And finally, we have something that perhaps most of us can agree on, that we ought to move forward. It ought to be non-controversial. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to point you to pointofview.net. You can find the website for the Civics Education Initiative there and find out how to make a difference in your state. Also, our Take Action button. We've got a nice graphic about bathrooms at the Point of View website right in the front. With a little picture of a girl, the typical girl that's pictured on women's rooms, and a guy climbing over the wall next to her with a big crossing out of that. And, that's the agenda right now is making that necessary. So we have got a take action item for you to contact your member of Congress to actually take some legislative action to come against President Obama's bathroom directive. There are several things Congress can do, and I'll talk about them a little bit later in the program. Ryan Anderson out of Heritage Foundation has 3 concrete steps Congress could actually take to right now hold the president accountable and begin to move against and push up against this initiative. But you can send an email to your member of Congress. All you have to do is go to the Take Action website and click through there. The letter is written for you, and it will send it directly to your member of Congress. You might want to try that during the break. It's pointofview.net. The donate button is also there. It'd be great if you'd make good use of that. Next up, Star Parker will join us. We'll be right back.
Imagine it's January 2021. The president elected in 2016 has served 4 years. Tell me, what does the Supreme Court look like with maybe 2, 3, even 4 justices named by this next resident of the Oval Office? Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? Depending on the results in November, 4 years from now will look very different, and together we can influence those outcomes. We need each other. Together we are the Truth Team, and together we can honor Christ as we exercise our stewardship as believers and citizens. One way to make a difference is to visit pointofview.net and support the Truth Team, pointofview.net. Or give when you call 1-800-347-5151. The nation is so divided, we must be united. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
My next guest always makes me smile, and that's because when I see her, she is always smiling. Her name is Star Parker, and she is the founder and president of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, which is a public policy think tank. It promotes market-based solutions to fight poverty. And before that, she had actually 7 years of firsthand experience in the grip of welfare dependency herself. And so now she majors on the solutions to that, and she speaks to the Black community in a way that only she can with all of her many talents. Star Parker is my guest. Star, thank you for joining me.
You're so welcome. It's good to be with you.
Well, it's good to have you.
I'm still trying to smile, too. You say I smile all the time. I do. In this election cycle, I'm still smiling, even though it's hard.
It's hard. It's hard to smile. Our choices are interesting. And that's my first question for you, Star, because we're going to talk about all things having to do with the sanctity of life today. That's where Star places a lot of her emphasis, speaking and writing. And I see an article in LifeSite News yesterday, top pro-life leaders meet with Donald Trump. Ben Carson says Trump is pro-life. What do you know about that?
Well, I know that I will not be attending that meeting because I am one that is adamant that we must, actually, in the words of Tip O'Neill, stay permanent in our interest. He said long ago that there in Washington are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interest. And my interests, as you just explained, are life in particular. When you think about what has happened when it comes to womb activity, sexual activity, after the 3 wars that liberal progressives declare on this society, we have collapsed our civil affairs. You think about in the 60s, we had a war on religion. We scrubbed our schools from all reference to God. We had a war on marriage with the feminist movement. It's nothing but the promotion of monism, which is, the elimination of all gender binary. And now look where we are with transgender opportunities for us to engage again in the cultural public square. And then we had a war on poverty that says don't worry about any natural consequences as a result of not having religion and or intact family life, because now we have safety nets. And these messages get people really, really lost. They don't know what to do with their lives without boundaries. I was lost, as you said. I've lived in and out of the lives of the left and those 3 wars and ended up in very reckless behavior, criminal activity, drug activity, sexual activity. I've been in and out of their abortion clinic after clinic. It was my birth control. It wasn't until a Christian conversion that I was able to change my life, because even after having all those abortions and thinking, well, maybe at one point, there's something wrong with this, I ended up having a child, still not married, and ended up living on welfare. So, yeah, I get it, and I am not about to now support a candidate of any sort, of any political party that buys into those ideas of secular statism, that really thinks that choice doesn't matter. Choice matters. It loses its meaning if it doesn't matter what you choose. And so, therefore, I won't be at that meeting, but what I will do is stay firm to my principles to make sure that we're advocates here in Washington, D.C., to declare not just to the country, but to these folks sitting right down the street from me on Capitol Hill, that while abortion may be legal, it's not lawful in God's eyes, and there are many of us that are going to do everything we can to end it in our lifetime.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can go to Star Parker's website, Urban Cure, by just clicking at pointofview.net and clicking through. You will find many commentaries and articles. She's a prolific speaker and writer, and she's written several books also. The piece that I chose to put on our website is Black Babies Matter, the Black anti-abortion movement's political problems. And just before we get to any political problems, Star, it's just a problem of basically a Black genocide that's taking place in the country today, isn't it?
In our pro-life community, which I prefer us to now turn ourselves back to anti-abortion community, are extremely concerned about what is happening, not just in our country, but around the world, to every ethnicity of children. I mean, this mindset that thinks that our children are to be exterminated, what God creates and says is his reward, that we think that we can just automatically control those births, is just horrific. But when you look particularly at the Black community, this is a major crisis, a major moral crisis. Nearly half of the Black pregnancies now in our country are ending in abortion. Nearly half. 3 in 5 black women will abort a child. These are just records. If we continue down this path that we're going right now, so we're talking every 3 in 5, 1, 2, 3. The destruction that occurs within a woman emotionally and mentally and morally and even sometimes medically once she's had an abortion is one of the reasons that we have so many people that are in such despair, in particular in our hardest hit communities. When you think about 1,500 black Americans being aborted every single day, that means that now the black population has reduced itself roughly by a third because of abortion. So this is an absolute crisis. This is something that needs emergency attention from the Congress. We're attempting to get some penalties in a existing law. It's called the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. It was passed with a voice vote. Even Hillary Clinton and Harry Reid voted for it. George Bush signed it into law, and yet there are no penalties. It's just a matter of, okay, so if a child is born alive, maybe it should have opportunity to live. You can't kill it. And yet Gosnell and many others were still killing even after children were being born alive. So it needs some penalties, some criminal
It sort of needs some
penalties.
teeth.
It needs some teeth. And this was an opportunity to get those teeth. So getting back to your first question, my concern when convention happens for the Republicans in July is if that is going to stay in their political platform. Because right now, a part of the Republican political platform is that we want teeth in that Born Alive Infants Protection Act. So when you have someone that's going to become the leader of the Republican Party now saying, well, I think that there are some exceptions. Well, once you open the door for any exceptions, then you open the door to also say, well, should we kill it? At what point? So there are many things that we should be concerned about when it comes to I guess we would call it the shame that has come upon our nation because of abortion legalized for all of us to be participating, where $520 million is going into the coffers of Planned Parenthood through our hard work. But when you look at the fact that it's really, really deeply impacting the black community, it should get the attention that you're giving it.
Well, one thing that we do know, and we've discussed here on the program, is that Planned Parenthood clinics are often strategically placed in poor neighborhoods, and neighborhoods where, you just have larger numbers of people who become desperate with this idea of an unwanted child, and Planned Parenthood is there to help, quote unquote. And that is something else that's, I think, concerning with regard to our political sort of situation, our platform, right. What's going to happen in Cleveland when the Republicans go there. The leader of the party was in support of Planned Parenthood at one time. Now he says, well, he's not in support of the part that does abortions.
Right.
There's a lot. Really, defunding Planned Parenthood would be a huge step in the right direction. We haven't managed to do that yet.
Right, because of this lack of political leadership and the compromise that has taken place since Roe v. Wade became national law, and even before then. You're absolutely right. When you point to all of a sudden now Planned Parenthood does good, Planned Parenthood is in the abortion business, period. Planned Parenthood does more than 400,000 abortions a year, period. They are the largest abortion providers in the country, period. And they're the president of the country, Barack Obama, went to one of their big galas and says, God bless you, Planned Parenthood. No, this is the reason that we're under economic judgment in our society today, is because we can't get it right on something so simple, this big crime against humanity. We didn't get it right during slavery, and 620,000 dead later, God stood up and said, no, this crime against humanity must stop. It may be legal, but it's not lawful in God's eyes. And so you're right about how there's a deliberate targeting from Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, deliberately decided to target black communities and other communities of ethnicities that she considered human weed. She was a eugenicist, and a lot of attention has been placed on it. In fact, Catherine Davis, who leads the Coalition for Black Pro-Lifers, has just recently testified at hearings which allowed them cure Derek McCoy, who runs our National Clergy Network, to testify in front of the Congress about how there's deliberacy in Planned Parenthood going specifically after, as you just mentioned, Penna, the most vulnerable. Those that are in our hardest hit communities are very, very lost. The damage of the welfare state is unprecedented when you think about how much damage has been done to these families and the breakdown of marriage in these communities. It's underappreciated that in the 60s, before they started all this social engineering, before we had Planned Parenthood targeting our most vulnerable, black families were relatively intact. 78% of husbands were in their homes with their wives raising the children. That number is exactly the opposite today. 78% of black children now are born outside of marriage. This is deliberate.
Star Parker is my guest, and she makes so much common sense. She needs to be listened to far and wide. That's why she's our guest today on Point of View, and we will continue our conversation. Let's open up the phones, 800-351-1212. If you've got a question for Star, we'd love to hear from you, 800-351-1212. We'll be right back with more of Point of View.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
My guest is Star Parker. She is founder and president of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. And Star, when you talk about sort of the tie between abortion, the sanctity of human life, moral values that have sort of been drained away from certain communities, and in fact, the whole nation, and also welfare reform or economic deprivation. Those all tie together, and that's what I love about you is you speak to all those things and they become a whole. And I saw a piece of news recently that another pro-life speaker, Ryan Baumberger, was trying to speak at Harvard. He was bringing up what we were just talking about, having to do with the disproportionate number of black babies that are aborted and how Planned Parenthood locates itself near those communities. And he was booed off the campus, shouted down, called disgusting names, accused of being a racist. He's black. And so, I mean, because this message that you are articulating so beautifully, it needs to be articulated in a broader manner, but the left is threatened by it, aren't they?
They're very threatened. In fact, it's every campus. I've been on over 190 campuses in this country in the last 20 years, and that same type of response is at each one of them. What the left very cleverly does to stop the facts from getting out to the other students that are there just trying to learn is shut you down. They shout you down. They run after you. They protest, make sure that your voice is not heard. They just want to make sure that no one gets to hear it because they know that if someone hears the truth, it starts to resonate and get down in their little hearts and spirits. I just had a recent occurrence. I was at Smith College, and of course the subject of lesbianism kept coming up during the Q&A, although most of my presentation was not about that specifically, but it was on these moral questions and including abortion. But one of the young ladies who I suppose was in that type of lifestyle, I was very touched by what I had to say, which is what they don't like. So when she came up to ask some questions, I think she was just overwhelmed and began to start crying. And then this so-called lover of hers came up and just put her hand on her shoulder to make sure that she did not continue in the discussion with me, private discussion, so that she would stay in that despair and in that life pattern. Mm-hmm. Ryan is a friend, and his message is very needed in our society today, and he's very courageous to continue to go into places even like Harvard to deliver it, regardless of those few that are trying to shut us down. Remember, Penna, this is how we got to the state of affairs in our country, where secularism has taken over the public square. It's because good men haven't done what Ryan is doing, and we know that evil then prevails as a result. So it's important. Your show's important, and other avenues to get the truth out. So those that are needing to hear it, those that are listening right now that have had an abortion and have been silently mourning it all these years, they need to be free. And actually, I pray for them right now, that they would go into one of our centers. There are many, many people that will help you right now. If you go into one of our pregnancy care centers, we have one in almost every community across this country now. Just Google them out, Pregnancy Care Center, your city, and let them love on you and help you get healed up. Those that are thinking about abortion right now, that are listening on the radio, they need to know this is not a good option because you will regret this choice. You will miss that child forever, and this is not a good option. So we have to continue to get the message out, and I am so encouraged that now Ryan has joined the pro-life movement. He's brand new, but he went straight to the top because he's very young, and he and his wife run the Radiance Foundation and have made their life passion and mission to get the truth out about the damage of abortion.
We've got a full bank of phones. People want to talk to you, Star, but let's go to South Carolina and speak with James. Hi, James. You're on Point of View.
Hi, how you doing today?
Great.
Yeah. Well, I disagree with you. I mean, I don't think abortion is right, but I don't think it's your job or anybody else's job to tell my wife, my daughter, my granddaughter, my granddaughter's granddaughters what they have the right to do. Republican, Democrat, Independent, it's not your right. If my wife was raped tomorrow, I would not want her to have that child. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you putting God into this and saying, God never said a damn word about abortion.
Well, all right, James, thank you. Let's let Star respond.
Yeah, that last statement is definitely not true. God speaks often about life and choosing such. But let's get to the meat of the matter. What is acceptable in the public square? Because we did have this discussion before on a crime against humanity during slavery. And the position you're taking is the exact same position that Stephen Douglas took, that when he was arguing against Abraham Lincoln, that, wait a minute, I get all this, this slavery talk, and hey, if you don't want one, if you don't, believe in it, then don't own one. We heard all of these same arguments. This is not for the public to decide whether someone else should have this right to do what they want with their so-called property. We had that discussion. We even had it at the Supreme Court, because remember when Dred Scott took his case to the court and said, well, what point did I become slave or free when my master kept moving in and out of different states? And we saw then the Chief Justice of the court, Tani, making these same arguments that you're making. Wait, just a minute. This is not our business in the public square to determine what others should do with or without their property and or their body, their life, their liberty, or their pursuits. That's inaccurate. Not only is it inaccurate because it is a crime against God, but even if you don't want to interject God into the discussion, then just look at the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration declares that we have these inalienable rights, and one is life, one is liberty, and one is our personal pursuit. So, we can argue about that and whether this is a good idea to continue into the future, which we're having those debates, but we're going to be secular and status, or are we going to be biblical and free? That is the discussion before us this election cycle. That is the discussion we're having about the court. But to assume that we shouldn't talk about it is that same assumption that was made early in the founding of our country. And 80 years later, with all those dead, we had to address that question.
I would contend that the conversation started with Roe versus Wade, or at least escalated, and we've been talking about it ever since. We're now starting to convince people because they can look into the womb and see the life. Let's take one more call, Star, before the break. Rob is in Texas. Hi, Rob. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for having me.
Go ahead.
My question and comment. When Ben Carson was running for president, he made the comment about how he does not...
Are you on a speakerphone?
No, ma'am.
Okay, talk right into the phone.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, yeah, that's much better.
Oh, I apologize. When Ben Carson was running for president, he said that he does not support abortion in any way, shape, or form. However, in the case of rape, he did support the utilization of RT-26 or whatever it's called.
RU-486.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Star, we only have a minute or so. Only right at the beginning. That was his position. So, Star, talk about that just for a second.
Just a real quick second. This is why we need another case to get up to the court so that we can have this national discussion.
Yeah.
We must decide if growing in womb, as you pointed out, we can now see. This is not 73 where we could say, well, it's just a blob. No, we know. We saw Gosnell saving parts. We see Planned Parenthood selling them. We need a national discussion about whether we're going to continue this crime against humanity.
Absolutely. Star Parker, thank you for making so much common sense on this issue and many others, and for joining me today.
You're welcome.
God bless you.
God bless you.
A baby is a baby. It's a child from the moment of conception. So Ben Carson's policy was actually anti-life. It was not a pro-life policy. On most things, he is pro-life, but I would say that's not a completely consistent position. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We've got a long break, but after the break, Bob Knight is going to join us. He is another person who makes so much common sense in this culture, and he's going to talk about the totalitarian regime that's coming out of this administration, their messages, and really their bullying of the American public. How can we fight back? Stay with us. Also, let me send you to pointofview.net. First of all, you can find out about all of our guests, their websites, and take action if you'd like on the bathroom bills, and also make a donation to this ministry. We'd appreciate it.
Does Point of View make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as district health director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with Point of View? Jeremy Dice of First Liberty is representing Dr. Walsh in his effort to correct this apparent injustice. And Jeremy Dice became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking the truth in love. Click on Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit. Please do it today. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. ofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for the second hour of Point of View. You know, the left in our country and really around the world has long requested and actually demanded that the rest of us be tolerant of people who are perhaps out of the box, perhaps even living lifestyles we consider immoral, perhaps changing the institution of marriage, for instance, or, as we heard in the last hour, supporting abortion for various reasons. And they ask for this type of tolerance. It's really their mantra, but it's gone way beyond this. And there's another piece we've put up at pointofview.net. The first line of it is, ever notice how threats of force invariably follow the left's pleas for tolerance? My guest says that it's gone beyond tolerance now, and he writes of the dawn of total intolerance. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but my guest is Bob Knight. He's a wonderful writer and thinker. He writes, this piece is at the Washington Times, but he also writes for townhall.com, One News Now, barbedwire.com, American Thinker, Daily Caller. He's senior fellow for the American Civil Rights Union. He's just been part of many of the great pro-family organizations over the years, and I'm so glad to have you, Bob, on Point of View.
Well, thank you, Penna, and I don't blame you for having trouble pronouncing totalitolerance.
Totalitolerance?
It's a made-up term. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making it up. It's a very descriptive one.
Well, it is. I didn't actually make it up. I'd heard it vaguely somewhere, and then I Googled it, and I found some guy had claimed to coin it 3 years ago. And he has a questionable website, so I didn't want to call too much attention to it. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, let's go ahead and use it. It's a useful term.
Well, it's at our website at pointofview.net. And, you know, you've made a list within this one piece. That's why I highly recommend it to folks who are wondering what's happening here. I mean, it's not just these moral issues anymore. It's that you have to comply. You have to celebrate sin within all of them. And the first one that you mentioned is back in 2008 when we were voting about marriage across the country, and California actually protected marriage. People got on board, gave money and all of that, and now they are being targeted in the name of this totalitolerance.
Yeah, somebody got a hold of the list of people who donated to the Proposition 8 marriage amendment referendum, which passed easily in California in 2008, and they created a website on Google, and you could go to it, and it would show the names and addresses and the amount given. So it opened people up, especially in places like San Francisco, to outright harassment. And the most glaring example of that was Brendan Eich, who is the founder of Mozilla Firefox, the browser company. They found out he'd given $1,000 to support marriage back in 2008. So 5 years later, he's ousted from his job and accused of hatred and bigotry, all for defending marriage. That's the way the left is operating now. They're basically saying, if you don't agree with us, we're going to come after you. We'll get you fired. We'll deny your basic rights. We'll turn you into an outcast. And it's not just that issue. It's a number of areas. I've listed just several in this column. And that Kamala Harris, the Attorney General for California, who's now running for U.S. Senate, she and 18 other liberal attorney generals have joined in an investigation of ExxonMobil for having the audacity to donate to groups that question climate change dogma. These are groups that say the science isn't settled, that there are questions that remain about whether the Earth is warming and what's causing it. And so they want to go after them and try to deny them money.
They want to prosecute them.
They want to actually prosecute them. And when Competitive Enterprise Institute writer Hans Bader criticized the inquiry, one of the Attorney General, Claude Walker of the Virgin Islands, sued for access to the group's donor lists, because they want to expose them.
Because you have an illegal attitude about.
They consider it illegal to disagree with them. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who took over from Eric Holder, discussed this with the FBI and floated the idea of criminally investigated climate change deniers, in academia and elsewhere. And I call this gangster government.
It really is.
It really is. They're saying you can't disagree with us anymore. We're going to use the power of the government to go after you. Americans ought to be outraged.
Well, they should. There are some that are. I know that there are states that are actually pushing back against this, especially the Obama administration's Justice Department going after climate deniers for basically believing in science and wanting a little bit of proof before we end up ruining whole industries across the country and our economy in the name of global warming. There's another piece of sort of evidence that we've got a totalitarian government, a totalitarian government, and that's in Wisconsin. This one doesn't get brought up as much, but talk about that.
Well, John Chisholm, the Democratic District Attorney of Milwaukee County, decided he wanted to investigate ties between conservative groups and the re-election campaign in 2012. Actually, it was in 2014 of Governor Scott Walker. And they did a series of raids, police raids with guns out, body armor, battering rams. This was at the crack of dawn. They raided homes of private citizens, terrifying families, trying to find collusion between groups that agreed with Governor Scott Walker on any number of issues. And last July, thank God, the Wisconsin Supreme Court rebuked the district attorney and said citizens had a right to be, quote, free from tyrannical retribution of arbitrary or capricious governmental prosecution. But here's the problem, Penna. Even though, yes, a couple of years later they get a slap on the wrist, the message is sent that if you step out of line with the prevailing leftists and progressives on any issue, this may happen to you and your family. And I'm afraid that kind of terrorism works. It intimidates people.
The word terrorism is not too strong a word, Bob. We've only got about a minute before the break, and I'm so glad you're sticking with me for the next segment. And folks, the phones are also open, 800-351-1212. But it chills freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and it causes people to sort of live in this box, and that is exactly what happens in totalitarian nations, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and they learn to speak in code, and they learn to use black humor to get around the official viewpoints. We saw this with the people in Russia when the communists ran it. There's a lot of dark humor that came out of Russia at the time because the government wouldn't allow people to speak freely and openly, and so they do it under their breath. They do jokes that could be taken several ways. People register their dissent somehow. That's the good news. People don't like this. But unfortunately, they've cowed so many in this country that political correctness is a very powerful weapon against free speech. But I think, Penna, you and I and a lot of people are beginning to see people fight back and be tired of this. One reason Donald Trump came out of nowhere was the first thing he did was knock political correctness.
It'd be nice to have presidential campaigns. Bob Knight's my guest. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
What are the key components of the free enterprise system in America today? Arthur Brooks, in his book, The Battle, describes 5 principles. The first principle is the purpose of free enterprise is human flourishing, not materialism. In this statement, he sets forth the moral case for free enterprise. He argues in one chapter that people flourish when they earn their own success. It's not money per se that's a measure. Instead, it's what Arthur Brooks called earned success. A second principle is that America stands for equality of opportunity, not equality of income. Arthur Brooks has found that non-Americans will tell you that Americans are the most egalitarian people in the world. Most of us believe that we should have similar opportunities, but also believe that we might end up in different places. A third principle is that we seek to stimulate true prosperity, not treat poverty. Arthur Brooks says that nearly every study of impoverished communities around the world show that prosperity, not poverty, is the right focus if we want to lift people out of poverty. A fourth principle is that America can and should be a gift to the world. Here is where we see a split in values. While some Americans see America as exploitative, most Americans believe that our country does more good than harm. And moreover, they believe that the nation has been a force for good in the world. And a final principle is that what truly matters is principle, not political power. Americans reject the pursuit of political power at the exercise of principle. Confidence in politicians in America is now as low as it was during the era of Watergate. You know, Arthur Brooks in his book explains how we can make the case for the free enterprise system, and these are key principles that we need to promote. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, Risen, the resurrection as seen through the eyes of a non-believer. Available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Time will not allow us to cover all of the examples of totalitarians that Bob Knight lists in his piece, The Dawn of Totalitarians, The Left Despises Free Speech Except for Obscenity, which is his Washington Times piece. We've linked to it at pointofview.net. But Bob Knight is my guest. He is such a wonderful thinker and sort of commentator on cultural issues. And he works hard to help Americans understand what's happening in the country and how to push back against it, which is what I appreciate you, Bob. But a piece of news came out, was actually brought into the studio to me before the show started today, and it comes from One News Now. Charlie Butts wrote this, who used to actually work with us. And transgender Obama appointee affirms LGBT agenda. Now, this is an appointee that President Obama has placed into a job in the administration. This picture of this person is, I have to say, very scary. But the appointment is to the Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, and she's 54, a man who lives as a woman. So I called her she. That's what she'd like to be called. Identified as Barbara Satin, a transgendered appointee to the Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Bob, what do you make of that?
I make that the administration is trying to tell people what their religions ought to be saying instead of what they're actually saying. The president appears to want to rewrite the Bible to ameliorate any concerns that transgenders or gays have about its strictures involving sexual morality. I mean, really, the left is at war with God fundamentally, and God's morality. And you could say they're at war with nature, and nature's God, as Thomas Jefferson put it in the Declaration of Independence. But no, this is bullying. He's putting somebody in charge of something that's supposed to help faith-based people find their way. And, to put a guy like this in charge who's totally confused, and that's what we're talking about, gender dysphoria, which is gender confusion. This isn't just a choice. For years, it was defined as a mental illness. And I think the way we ought to be treating it compassionately is getting people help to overcome it.
But that's illegal now in many places.
Well, it is. This is part of the tolerance article that I cut out just for length, but it was the case in New Jersey where the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a hard left group out of Alabama, sued a small Jewish group that directs people to counselors who can help them overcome same-sex attraction. And they sued them under the consumer fraud law, saying nobody can possibly go straight if they're already gay. They can go gay if they're straight, that's okay, but we're going to make it illegal for anybody to try to get around these feelings. And what's scary is, there are kids who are confused, and they need solid counseling. And what they're trying to do is criminalize that all over the country. New Jersey isn't the only place where that's happened. California has done it. And one of the examples I use in the column about tolerance is linked, and it's Mayor Bill de Blasio in New York, the guy who's trying to crush Chick-fil-A for being for marriage. He's been picking on them. The City Human Rights Commission, under his leadership, is proposing huge fines against people who use pronouns that match people's actual sex instead of the new terms invented by, quote, gender nonconforming people. And these terms are Z, that's Z-E, or H-I-R. And you're supposed to use those because we're supposed to get rid of gender entirely. So you'd say something like, well, Z went to the hairdressers today.
And that could be he, she, or whatever in between.
Yep, that's their whole point. They're trying to wipe out God's natural categories of male and female. And by the way, if you buck this law, the civil penalties are from $125,000 up to $250,000 if they believe it's willful, wanton, or malicious. You're continuing to speak to them in a way they don't like.
How do you find out what they like? You have to ask them?
Good question. That's another thing. Laws are not supposed to be this fuzzy. And a lot of laws are thrown out because they're not clear. And it's a violation of your rights not to even know what the law is supposed to be doing to you or for you. So I'm wondering, somebody along the way is going to be charged with this and fight back, and I would hope it would get thrown out of court by a judge who would uphold the First Amendment.
One would hope. Well, I love your line after that story. This would be funny, except it's deadly serious. And that's true, Bob. We've got some callers on the line, but before we go there, I just do want to ask you, what do you think is really underlying this whole push toward confusing the genders, removing gender? I mean, is that what we're trying? Is that what the left is pushing for? Is a genderless society or a society that doesn't have families? I mean, why could they possibly want this kind of a culture?
Okay, in a nutshell, the left has been at war with God and God's sexual morality since its beginning. I mean, the people in the French Revolution were pushing promiscuity along with left-wing economics. It's because if you destroy the family, you destroy the church. And you get the two big things out of the way for establishing socialist government where the government has all the power. So this is just part of the cultural Marxism that has descended on America in the last 50 years. They realized they couldn't do it economically, so they resorted to cultural Marxism instead. Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist, coined the phrase capturing the culture, and that's what they've been doing. And when you weaken the foundation of the country where people can grow up in families and become adults who are personally responsible, then they're not very good recruits to the socialist revolution. So that's what it's all about. They're just trying to destroy what keeps us sane and personally responsible for our conduct.
Bob Knight is my guest. Let's go to the phones. There's another Bob waiting in Maine, listening in on WSEW. Hi, Bob. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, thanks for hearing me. I got two little comments, if I may. First one is they're all coming out of the closet, and they want to keep us in the closet, and they consider many of us Christians hypocrites, but limiting our free speech to evangelize, but they're evangelizing and proselytizing through government, academia, et cetera, et cetera. And I had another comment, too. Oh, yes, maybe your guests might comment on Agenda 21 of the United Nations treaty, which has been signed by, I think, including ours, 147 different countries.
Bob, is that related to this tolerance agenda?
Yeah, it is. Actually, it is.
Okay, Bob in Maine. Now we're going to go back to Bob Knight.
Yeah, in Northern Virginia. Agenda 21 is enough for a whole other program, Penna, but it is about tolerance because it is a worldwide effort to impose a certain worldview on everybody. So I agree with the caller that really does fit into this. But, you know, you just look at it in this country, it's alarming enough. The U.S. Army is now under the tutelage of the first openly gay Secretary of the Army. Can you imagine now being a Christian chaplain in the Army? And if the soldiers come to you for guidance in sexual matters, what do you say? If you tell them the truth, that the Bible has nothing good to say about homosexuality and that it steers people away from it because God loves us, well, that's a hate crime now in our military. And you just wonder how long that the military can pick up recruits. It's usually among the heartland people. It's people in families, often that love God. These are the breadbasket people. I have a terrible feeling that if they weed out people like that, we're going to have a very different armed forces, and one that may not be friendly to the citizens sometime, if this tolerance keeps going.
Bob Knight, thank you so much for sharing with us your thinking on this. And, you know, it sort of helps to make sense of some of these directives that come down from the Obama administration at this point and from the left in other cases. And so it's good for us to be able to sort of think in broad terms. So thank you for the article and for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Penna. And we didn't even mention the order telling all schools in America to open their restrooms to anybody who wants them.
I think that we've left that unsaid because that's been a topic of conversation throughout our programs for the last couple of weeks. And I think that everybody's kind of got that underlying disturbing thought. But thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks. Thank you, Penna.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to take your calls here at Point of View. Again, the number is 800-351-1212. Open lines for the rest of the program. We would love to hear from you. Again, go to pointofview.net. I highly recommend you print out and read The Dawn of Totalitolerance by Bob Knight. It will help you to understand what's going on. We'll be right back.
From Sony Pictures Home Entertainment comes Risen on digital and Blu-ray. The biblical story of the resurrection as told through the eyes of a non-believer.
The body has vanished. His tomb is empty.
Available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital. Risen, rated PG-13. If you're prone to depression or melancholy, you might want to avoid the evening news these days. The only way to dispel the encroaching darkness is to raise up a light. Evil shouts in the streets, and we urge you to support Point of View as we spread truth and light over the airwaves. Join the Truth Team. Visit pointofview.net and click on Become a Monthly Partner. God's grace is still available for America. Help us to proclaim it. Call 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or again, give online at pointofview.net.
Point of View will continue after this. You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
The best line out of Bob Knight's article, The Dawn of Totalitarians, comes I guess 2/3 of the way through. He says, this would be funny, except it's deadly serious. And it is serious. We need some serious responses to this agenda of bullying and pushing immorality upon the nation. And on the bathroom directive, which Bob Knight mentioned at the end, but we all have got that in our mind. We know that 2 weeks ago is sort of, it's just sort of hung over the conservative Christian's psyche when we think about what's at stake in this presidential race. And there are some things that can be done to push back against it. If we're not going to push back against this bathroom directive as a country and as a pro-family conservative movement, then I don't think we'll push back on much. But the Daily Signal, which is a daily publication, and I recommend it, from the Heritage Foundation, has a piece, came out yesterday by Ryan Anderson and Roger Severino, and it says that it basically recommends 3 ways conservative lawmakers should fight back Obama's bathroom directive. And it makes 3 recommendations for Congress. And that is the subject of our latest action item, which is at pointofview.net. You can see the graphic about the bathrooms up there. And right in the middle of the page, you can go there. It's Take Action. And you can click through and just put your name in there. And this will send a message to your member of Congress that they need to push back. Here's some ways that this can be accomplished. They say, this is Ryan Anderson and Roger Severino, smart guys at Heritage. Congress has at least 3 different ways of reasserting its authority. Number 1, Congress could make clear that all federal laws that refer to a person's sex cannot be understood or interpreted by any court or federal agency to mean gender identity. And that's what they're trying to do. They've taken Title IX and other laws regarding education, regarding civil rights, and they've tried to add a category. That category is gender identity, which is basically, as Bob Knight said, gender confusion, and made that a right. So based on if you're a gender confused person, you've got all kinds of rights based on that, including going into the bathroom that you want to go into. Number 2, second thing Congress can do, they could pass a statute offering the same clarification that was mentioned before, but targeted just to the specific federal laws the administration has abused. Those laws that I just mentioned, Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, and also Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and one more, Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, because, ladies and gentlemen, something else was announced the same day that the bathroom directive was announced, 2 weeks ago. A new Obamacare regulation requiring federally funded physicians, hospitals, and insurers to assist or pay for gender identity transitioning treatments or surgeries with no religious exemption. So all doctors have to, if they're in the obstetric surgery field, they have to do these surgeries when asked to do so, according to Obamacare. You have to pay for it with your taxpayer dollars. So Congress needs to basically pass something that would protect people against that, and not allow federal law and education code and civil rights law to be redefined simply because President Obama says it includes gender identity. The third thing Congress can do, pass statutes based on the power of the purse. Congress has the power of the purse. It could specify that the Departments of Education, Justice, and Health and Human Services, as well as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, may not use any funds to implement or enforce its new administrative transgender directives or regulations against persons, institutions, schools, businesses, and governments. So in other words, any funding mechanism that would be behind these directives would be prohibited by Congress. So those are 3 ways Congress could weigh in. And if you send your email through pointofview.net through the Take Action piece there at the website, it's right on the front page. You won't be able to miss it. You can make a difference, and you can let your member of Congress know that you support a pushback, some sort of pushback against this directive. Let's go to the phones. I promised we would give you the platform. this last couple of segments of the program. So let's go to Jim in New Hampshire. Hi, Jim. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. A couple things. Number one, these people are calling God a liar. And what they're saying is, I was born a man or I was born a female, but I'm really a female in a man's body. That's calling him a liar, and that goes vice versa for the females. And the other thing, too,
it's really denying something so basic about God's creation. Just about the most basic part of God's creation, the male and the female, is being denied here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yep. And the other thing too is we have come into a movement where now good is considered evil and evil is considered good. And I think I know for our church, we intend to stand up. We will not bow down to any federal government, any organization that states that we have to call males and females by what they
Different
want. Or
pronouns.
Yeah, exactly. We will not bow down to any of them. We will tell the truth, and we will use God's word. And that's the bottom line for us.
Jim, what would your church has your church discussed what it would do if it was asked to do a same-sex marriage? Have they made a policy about that?
Yes, we have. Yep.
Do they have it in their legal documents?
The documents would probably come from the organization. I come out of a Southern Baptist church, so the organization up here,
your state,
yep.
Baptist. Because the reason I'm asking that is because we have Kelly Shackelford every Friday, just about every Friday, or someone from First Liberty Institute, that they're co-hosting the show, and one of the things that he warns churches about is getting their bylaws in order and making sure that they state where they stand on marriage, that it's between one man and one woman, and that's the only kind of marriage they perform. Because if it's not already in your sort of doctrinal statement for your, I don't know if it's covered if you're in a denomination or if each individual church needs it. But I assume that each individual church needs it.
Yeah,
and so that'd be very important to have.
Yep, that's a darn good question. Matter of fact, I'll be bringing that up tomorrow. But I'm just so ashamed of this country. I fought for this country. And I'll tell you right now, if I had to do it all over again today to fight for this country, I don't know. You know? It's just gone haywire. Yeah. Where a grown guy, a grown man can walk into a little girl's gym locker room and say, I'm a female and I'm going to change here and do it. No?
Jim, I know. I sense your frustration, and but you're still part of this country, so I just pray really for you and all the listeners that we'll be part of the solution, or at least stand for what's right and not give up yet.
Yes.
Not ready to give up.
I think that Congress, we need to lead the way, but I think Congress needs to back us too.
Yeah. Well, they work for us, so we need to weigh in. That's why I mentioned the Take Action part of our website too. Thanks for calling, Jim. I really appreciate it, and I sense your frustration, and I actually feel it too. Let's go to Lynn in Florida. Hi, Lynn. You're on Point of View.
Hi. Thanks so much for taking my call. I am calling about, the directive from Obama about people in schools, the transgender.
Can you get really quick to the point, because we've got about a minute?
Well, there's a directive from Obama in nursing homes, and I nobody said a word to me. I'm a nurse in a nursing home, and it's in this magazine that I read at McKnight's, and it's like the magazine for people that run nursing homes.
Really?
And it says there's an executive directive and they must comply.
Same thing as this school directive?
Where I work.
Is it pretty much the same as the school directive?
Yes, it says here, nursing homes receiving Medicare are among the entities that need to change their policies to comply with the executive order.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's called totalitarians. That's really what's underneath this. Thank you, Lynn. I'm sorry that we can't continue to discuss it. The show's about to end. But I really appreciate that was a piece of information that just adds to the rest of it. So I appreciate your calling in. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great evening. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine for their hard work on the program today. And as you know, there's a lot more to discuss. We'll try to do it tomorrow. But meanwhile, have a great evening. God bless you.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Oh, that's what happens when you get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Way to clear out the phone lines. I thought that we were at the top of the hour. We're not. We have another segment, and I'm really grateful to Lynn in Florida. I wish I hadn't cut her off so quickly for bringing that piece of information about nursing homes and the fact that the same directive about bathrooms where the Obama administration has said to the public schools across the nation that they must allow people to use bathrooms according to their preferred gender rather than their biological one also applies to nursing homes and their federal funding through Medicare and other ways. Because one of the things about the bathroom bill is that the sort of the stick, there's really no way of enforcing. It's not like illegal to limit your bathrooms to men and women, but the federal government has said that federal funding will be denied to school systems that don't apply. And many times the federal funding in most states, the bulk of it, really the lion's share of it, goes to the nutrition program for kids who qualify for free lunches and free breakfasts. So that it goes to the poor kids of the community and their needs through the schools. And so that's what the Obama administration is willing to do, willing to deny that. And now we're hearing that nursing homes also fit into this. So Medicare money will be withheld from these nursing homes if they don't comply. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Again, Bob Knight, I think, hit the nail on the head with his column on totalitarian tolerance. Amazing. We've actually got some calls. And we will take them in just a moment. I do want to mention sort of a little piece of news that comports with this, because recently we have also announced that the company Target actually voluntarily has such a bathroom policy. They're allowing people to choose according to how they feel that day about their gender, what bathroom and dressing room to use. And it's very interesting because there's been this boycott of Target that was spearheaded by the American Family Association. And actually over 1 million people, I think it's 1.2 million people, have signed the petition to Target and saying they're boycotting Target. I know many more people who didn't even sign the petition are boycotting Target. And it's very interesting because Target's having a little trouble. Their business is tanking. They had a recent quarterly earnings report. And of course, it's a challenging retail market right now, so that's part of it. But their stock has fallen significantly in the past month, and we're doubting that their social policies have helped them win any new customers at this point. But they're blaming the weather. Target says that really it's the rain and the cold weather that we've had this winter that has actually caused the weakness in the first half of the year. They still say their CEO, Brian Cornell, told the Wall Street Journal that they expect their earnings forecast for the full year to come back, to sort of recuperate here and have a resurgence. So we'll see. I think this issue has brought a lot of attention, and we will see by December whether or not they make their projections and their goals. But he said it's been a very wet and cold start to the year, and it's reflected in our sales. We haven't seen anything from a structural standpoint that gives us pause. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're part of that boycott, or if you want to be, we will see how much effect that has. Let's take some calls. Nancy is in the state of Georgia. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I have been a part of the Thinking Moms revolution for quite some time. I had 3 children, and 2 of them were born in the 70s, late 70s, and 1 in the 80s. And that was a time when a lot of the vaccinations were full of all kinds of the high levels of mercury. All 3 of my children suffered adverse effects from shots that back then I didn't realize what it was until all that came, brought to light. But one of the ingredients that most of the mothers at the Thinking Moms Revolution, that's just a group of moms who have gotten together to try to, figure out what we could do about what's happening to our children. But the one is MRC5 and WI38.
What are those for?
Okay, these are in our vaccinations that's going into the children.
Which vaccinations?
Several of them. There's a list here, but the MRC5 is actually a...
Is it an ingredient?
It's actually cell lines from a male. It was an aborted male child back in the 1960s that they grow these viruses on. The other is the WI38, which is actually a female. It was an aborted female that they grow cell lines on. So there's been a big question is what happens when an injection of the female tissue is injected into a male child and vice versa.
Interesting.
They said, is it possible that the fetus's DNA from these cells can recombine to the baby's cells and insert in its own DNA? So maybe if people would do more research and, have conversation about that. What is causing all this gender confusion?
Wow, Nancy, that's something I'd never heard. I appreciate you bringing it up. And maybe there is some sort of a physical, biological component to this. Could be. I've also heard that, some of the things in our meat cause different sexual issues and early puberty and all of that.
Because they do all of the, the different hormone therapies and stuff like that too. But if this is all started by the government, and it's the government that's pushing for everybody to accept this, rather than there's always a cause and effect to everything that happens.
Okay, Nancy, thanks for your call. I'm going to take one more before the break. That's interesting, something to think about. Thanks for your call. I appreciate it. Let's go to Anita in California. Hi, Anita, real quick before this time really the end of the show. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, I was listening to the gentleman who was very upset because he said that if his wife had been raped, he would want her to be able to have an abortion. Well, he's never really known someone who has had one, how it affects them psychologically and physically the rest of their lives. Unless Jesus forgives them and they're able to go on, even then it's still devastating. Mm-hmm. And I had felt that way too. I understand where he's coming from. If I was ever raped, well, I wouldn't want the child. But I read a book called The Atonement Child by Frances River of a young woman in college who was raped, and she went ahead and had the child. And that changed my mind. I thought, no, this is God's creation. And he has a reason, whether I give it up for adoption or I keep the child myself. It is still a child, and it has a right to live, and we can't change what God says.
Anita, I really wanted to get your call in because I saw that you were responding to that. And thank you so much for just bringing that little piece to us here at the end of the program. The consistent position on life, consistent pro-life, is that that is a child. It's a creation of the living God. There may have been a sinful reason that baby was conceived, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a human life.
That's
and
right.
All life is to be protected, and we as believers are definitely responsible to do that. So thank you very much for that call and for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking my call. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And I do want to, again, thank everybody that helped make the show possible today. Sometimes these shows have a lot of parts and pieces, so I appreciate all of it. And also just to Shamila, who puts the website together. And I do want to send you there. And there's so much there for you. The Take Action item, I think, if you want to make a difference on this issue, this is the time to do it. We actually have a Congress that would be predisposed to push back against the Obama administration. So let them know that you want them to by going to pointofview.net, click on that Take Action item, and it will take you very easily through a couple of steps to get something sent to your member of Congress. The donate button would be key, too. We would really appreciate anything that God would lead you to do to help support our ministry. And ladies and gentlemen, again, I do hope and pray you have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow for Point of View.
Does Point of View make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as district health director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with Point of View? Jeremy Dice of First Liberty is representing Dr. Walsh in his effort to correct this apparent injustice. And Jeremy Dice became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking the truth in love. Click on Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit. Please do it today. Pointofview.net. or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.